Hi there, this is Dr. Evan Osar with the Institute for Integrative Health and Fitness Education. Welcome to this edition of Integrative Movement Insider. And this is part 3 of a 5-part series on helping your clients maintain hip mobility. And the reason I'm saying maintain hip mobility is because you already have great strategies for helping your client develop hip mobility. You know how to do self-myofascial release and or manual therapy. You know how to do stretching and mobility work to improve hip mobility. The challenge isn't developing hip mobility, it's maintaining hip mobility. So in this 5-part series, I'm sharing with you the exact strategies we use here in our clinic and the exact strategy we teach as part of the Integrative Corrective Exercise Instructor Program, which we are doing this weekend here in our clinic, and also the Integrative Movement Specialist Certification Program, which is a year-long intensive where we teach the integrative movement system and the specific approach that we use with our own clients and patients here in the office. And if you've been following the series, I've already shared the first 2 secrets, which are really just the first 2 steps to helping your client develop and maintain hip mobility. The first, remember, stop gripping. Stop over gripping the glutes, the posterior or external hip rotators, and the hamstrings, which pull the pelvis into posterior pelvic tilt, flex the lumbar spine, and drive the femoral head forward and or the ball forward in the socket, and that limits hip mobility, which leads into the secret or key number 2, which is train the ability of your client to get anterior pelvic rotation or rotation of their entire thoracopelvic cylinder over top the femoral heads. So that way you can eccentrically load the hamstrings, the glutes, and the external hip rotators, so that way they can use it more effectively during the concentric phase of their exercise patterns. So here we're on to the 3rd secret or the 3rd key to maintaining hip mobility. The 3rd secret or key to maintaining hip mobility is use the appropriate progressions. Make sure your client is progressing appropriately. We have a saying that we teach during our certification classes and that we teach all our clients and patients that come into our office with hip mobility issues. And that's ETR, earn the right. Your client needs to earn the right to get to the next level of exercise progression. Because if they don't earn the right, meaning they don't maintain alignment, breathing, and control through the proper progressions and work through the proper progressions, they're going to go back into their compensations and just limit the mobility that you helped them create. And let me share with you a perfect example that illustrates this point. Many of your clients will read Shape Magazine or Men's Fitness, whatever their resource of choice is. And then they'll go and try that exercise in the gym, and or they'll want you to train them harder. So here's a perfect example of that. Your client wants to really work their glutes, shape their glutes, and develop glute strength. So we all know that a hip hinge and or stiff-legged deadlift single leg is a great pattern. So we'll start having them do loaded or reaching type versions of a single leg deadlift. Maybe they're using a dumbbell, doing this kind of pattern, and they've never earned the right. Maybe they've learned how to do a deadlift pattern, but they've never earned the right to get to that pattern. Because here's what we commonly see, and this is virtually everyone we look at, from our beginners to the more advanced people to our athletes. Almost all of them with hip, low back, and knee problems go into this exact pattern. And I'll turn around and illustrate it. So what happens is, watch the line on my shorts. They get into their single leg pattern. They'll have a dumbbell in their hand, even a light dumbbell. And when they come down into this pattern, they go into that rotation type pattern. They're not creating, and they'll lose their balance. They're not creating pure hip hinge. And you see the shift in my pelvis. You see me lose my balance. And then they're trying to overcompensate by lifting their chest up and using their erectors, but they're still not creating that optimal alignment and control. Therefore, they're going to compromise their hip mobility. So whatever hip mobility you created in the beginning of the session, they're going to lose it because now the nervous system sees that as a violation of its principles. It's going to start trying to protect the body, so it's going to start making things tighter, especially around the hip complex, because the individual never earned the right to get to that pattern. So let me give you an example of how we teach and progress our clients as well as our athletes in the hip hinge progression. It starts with that anterior pelvic rotation. So it's just aligning that thoracopelvic cylinder, the head and neck over the thoracopelvic cylinder, thorax over top the pelvis. First is just teaching them the pure hip hinge pattern, making sure they get eccentric loading through the glutes and hamstrings. From there, then we load it. The next progression is the split stance. So it's the same idea, head and neck, thorax stacked above the pelvis. From here, keep the pelvis square, and now we go into the split stance. hip hinge pattern, making sure they keep the pelvis square to that forward leg. Then we load that pattern. The next progression we use is with elevated rear leg hip hinge pattern. So from here, we have them elevate their leg or push against the wall. And again, it's the same idea. It's setting the client up, long spine, rib cage over top the pelvis, hands on the pelvis, step back. They're still squared up. They're still squared up to that forward leg. And now they're going to do the hip hinge pattern. We're making sure that they're staying completely aligned, pelvis, rib cage, and hinging over top that forward leg with no rotation, no compromise of their alignment throughout the pattern. Then we'll load that. Then they're ready to progress to the single leg version. I'm going to turn around so you can actually look and see what we're evaluating for in our clients to make sure that they've earned the right to get there. So from the back side, we're going to have the client long spine, stack the thorax above the pelvis, and then make sure they stand on a single leg and maintain their alignment. There should be no change in hip, knee, ankle, or foot alignment, no change in their thoracopelvic cylinder. Hands go on the pelvis, and from here, it's just a pure hip hinge motion, making sure they keep that pelvis level and square. We don't want to see that pelvis rotate this direction. They stay square to the forward leg. They're not losing alignment or control of the lower extremity. They're staying completely aligned, and now they come back to the upright position without over squeezing and going to posterior pelvic tilt. So again, stack the head and neck, thoracopelvic cylinder stays aligned, and then they create that pure hip hinge motion, making sure they keep that pelvis square to the forward leg, not losing rotation, come back up to the standing position, and then from there, they're ready to add the next level. So then it's just align, rib cage over top of the pelvis, comes a single leg. Now they can start to reach. So again, it's the same idea. Keep that pelvis square to the forward leg, then they can add a small reach, come back up and control without going into posterior pelvic tilt and lumbar spine flexion. Again, reaching, making sure that pelvis stays square to the forward leg, not rotating away from the forward leg. So reaching and then coming back up to single leg stance. Then from there, start the loading progression. So that way your client has earned the right to get to that pattern. They've gone through the appropriate progressions like you do with all your exercise patterns. They've earned each step of the way. You've appropriately aligned and controlled them. You've loaded them appropriately. You've progressed them strategically so that they can maintain the alignment and control throughout the progressions. And then the nervous system likes what you're doing for it, and it will give you and allow the client to maintain that mobility that you helped them develop. That's really the third and final key. The strategy we teach as part of the integrative movement system in our certification programs is how do you take your client from where they come to you, whether they're a beginner, intermediate, and or advanced fitness person or athlete, and how do you progress them appropriately? Because the thing we see most frequently with our clients and athletes in our office here is they're not progressing appropriately. They progress way too fast. They never earn the right to get to those higher level patterns, and that's where they're getting those compromises, and the body starts shutting down range of motion to protect itself. So, hope you enjoyed this series. On Thursday, I'll be back with part 4 of this 5-part series, and I'll show you another exercise progression and how to use these concepts that we teach as part of the Integrative Movement System certification program, the Corrective Exercise Instructor program, as well as the Integrative Movement Specialist program as well. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you next time at Integrative Movement Insider. This is Dr. Evan Osar. Make it a great day.